what I'm about to show you, I do more like a stone thing. But let's say a sucker had grown here, and it's like a whip. And because it's young wood, it's flexible. And let's say this branch is a little bit higher, but because it's flexible, I could bend it under an existing branch. And I'll often do that, and then come back and take off the existing. I can't see all this. But do you get that idea of the sucker and how you can bend it? So let's go on a little journey to the beginning of a tree. One of the things that trees do is every year they grow a ring of growth, and that's where the cambium moves outboard one layer, and the inner layer of that becomes wood. So that ring of wood, when it becomes wood, hardens. So young growth that's 1, 2, 3 years old can be bent, but eventually it gets thick and too fat and it can't be bent. So when you plant a tree, one of the things that you can do, and it's really functional, is use a tree branch spreader so that you create a 45 to 60 degree angle here. Now, some trees do that naturally, but there are varieties that grow really vertical, and you need to develop this strong crotch angle, because if it's more vertical, you'll get included bark in here. And now time travel, let's let 15 years go by. This has become a whole big branch in its own right. It has 1.5 bushels of fruit, that's 60 pounds, but this crotch angle is not strong enough to hold that. And then it breaks, and time travel here too, this has become big. It breaks down and splits right through the bark and tears out a big portion of the tree. And 10, 15 years from now, if you've let this grow and fill that light space, you'll get attached to it. You'll see it as an important part of your tree. But in the first year or two, when a crotch angle is too big, coming in and snipping off a little branch is no big deal. So that's another important element. Now let's imagine we're planting a tree, and we're going to take this down to a whip. If I had a tree like this, and branches are about 2 to 3 feet off the ground, I'm holding it up, and this is how it came to me from the nursery, I would be making probably 2 pruning cuts to this tree in training. I mostly want to train branches in the early years. I mostly want to not get too excited about having bought a great hand pruner and having nice pruning books that tell me to take this and this off, because I want the tree mostly to grow wood and get to the fruit-bearing portion of its years. So mostly I focus on training. But one of the cuts you would have to make, and this is where ruthlessness is important, because you have to remember what it's going to be like 10 years from now when you've formed an attachment. Right now this tree has just come from the nursery. You haven't even laid under it and read a poetry book yet. Nothing has happened with this tree yet. But the cut that would be made, if I got a tree like this from the nursery, these are called feathers. They're nice laterals, the beginning of a branch. The cut that would be made is this, because that limb, being the same size almost as the leader, becomes like a divided highway where the tree just funnels nutrients in both directions. These are all smaller than that leader. What I just showed you took me like 20 years to really appreciate. So I still have trees that have these 2 divided highways because I didn't make that decision, and now I have read poetry under those trees, and it's I'm not going to cut that off. But now this tree has some balance. Let's pretend. I love this. We're in an actual orchard and we're pretending. Let's pretend this tree now has no feathers at all. So what we have is just a total whip. And let's say that whip is about this tall, 5 feet tall. And over there on that tree, the very first branch off the ground is at about 2.5 feet. So often growers want first branches somewhere in that 2.5 to 3.5 foot range. Well, if I planted this and did no pruning to the whip, I might get branches down here. Well, that's okay, I can cut them off. I might get first branches up here, but maybe I don't want them quite that high unless I'm planning to graze cows in the orchard. But I actually can do a pruning cut now that's going to make the choice of where first branches are. Now this is with a whip. If I got a tree which had nice laterals to begin with where I wanted, I wouldn't be doing this. And that choice is the fact that when I make a heading cut, not at a branch juncture, but actually through the limb, and if I did this cut, that would be a heading cut. When I make a heading cut, I'm removing the tip bud. The apical bud produces a hormone called auxin, which inhibits the growth of the buds immediately below it from popping out and taking over. So the leader has this method of kind of keeping control over, I'm going to be the one going to the top. But when you remove the leader, it's a free-for-all in terms of the top buds trying to compete to become the leader. And what happens is, let's say I make this heading cut here. This is about at 42 inches high. What happens is that 2 to 3 to 4, sometimes even 5 buds all try to jump in and be the leader. And they form what we call a crow's foot response. That means that there's 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 apical buds all producing auxin right now. And that flood of auxin, about 8 to 10 inches below where I make this heading cut, causes these buds to pop out laterally. So if I let this crow's foot grow so that each shoot maybe becomes 4 or 5 inches long, that's long enough for this effect to begin. And then I come back in somewhere in mid-June or so, and I snip off. This is where I have to be careful and not leave just like one certain finger up. I have to choose another. I go back to one leader, so all the energy goes into this. Now, if you've ever done a cut like this on a whip, and you saw that response and you didn't grow it, all 3, 4, 5 of these maybe grow this much. And it becomes like a witch's broom almost. Whereas if you come back and you thin them, once you let them be there long enough to produce that response, the one that you leave might grow 3+ feet. And the tree is just dividing its energy that way in terms of getting it going.